Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And it says, finally, my brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are good report, if there is any virtue, if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. And as I was examining the scripture, I was thinking about what are the ingredients for success, for personal success, for country success. And I started to think about when you are producing a cake, whatever ingredients you put in the cake is what you're going to get. So if you put rotten ingredients in it, you're going to get a rotten cake. I thought about an assembly line. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying, our young people, are involved in so many negative things. And so I said to the person, I said, well, whatever part you put on the assembly line, that's the car you're going to get. So in order for us to find success personally and individually, we have to make sure that we think about, meditate on, and put the right things into our system, share the right things with our children, and make sure that we try to find things that are good and good report. We live in a world where there are all kinds of challenges, but if we can focus in on making sure that we put the good ingredients in, then we'll get a good product out. Amen? Amen. Amen. Let's bow our heads. Father, we just thank you for this day. Thank you for another opportunity to go over the business of the country. And Father, we ask your guidance and your direction as we proceed today. And we thank you for wisdom. And thank you for discernment to know what to do and what to say and what policies to enact. And we give you thanks for these things. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. Forgive us not our sins. Deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever.
Dr. Hubert Minnis, Peter Turnquist, Brent Simonet, Desmond Bannister, Renwood Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Greenstein, Marvin Dane, Frankie Campbell, Nicio Diagula, Michael Pintard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Pereira, Alicia Rowe, Renville Rowe, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Letitia Parker Edstrom, Aaron Lewis, Carlton Boleg, James Albury, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Folk, Miriam Repley Emmanuel, Rick Shipman, Ruben Ramming, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Don Cartwright, Chanel Ferguson, Glennis Hannah Martin, Picewell Forbes, Chester.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, just by way of a reminder, tomorrow morning, the Book of Condolences will be presented in the foyer of the House of Assembly, and all members, all senators, former members of Parliament, and dignitaries and members of the public will be invited to attend at the House of Assembly tomorrow morning, beginning at 9 a.m., to express their sympathies and condolences to the family of the late Sir William Allen, and an expression of gratitude for a full life of service to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. Communications by the clerk.
Mr. Speaker.
Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown. First reading of bills.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, House. I'd just like to start off with a bit of housekeeping, Mr. Speaker. On the notices of motions for today, Wednesday forenoon, the 27th of January, the very first item on that listing is a bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act. I would beg the indulgence of the House to have that removed from the list, Mr. Speaker, based on what I'm about to lay.
Honorable Leader for the official opposition, the member for Freetown is seeking to have a bill to withdraw a bill from the agenda and to replace it with a bill that he's presenting. Is there any objection? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, it could be a possibility that we are hoping that the independence of the House is sent to allow us to withdraw the bill as it is unanimous consent of the House's meeting. We should have gotten in contact with you as well, but I know we did speak to the official opposition. There is no slight of disrespect to you who are considered independent. So we would beg your indulgence to allow us to pull this bill and to replace it with the updated version of what we intend to debate going forward. 13. It's the first bill on 13.
Very first item.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce...
Honorable member, can you switch your constituencies?
Oh, sorry. I have this one here. Sorry.
So, honorable member, just for the record, we have the unanimous consent of the, no objection from the opposition, no objection from the independent member. Honorable member,
Thank you, members. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the Civil Aviation Bill 2021.
Honorable member, just before we proceed, just so the record can be complete, it is hereby ordered that the bill number 13, a bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act, be withdrawn from the agenda. Second, can I have a copy? Copy. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for first time. A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act. As many as are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose would stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act.
Further first reading of bills.
The new one. Yeah, that's done on the table.
Order that the bill
Mr. Speaker,
be brought up.
that's not.
Yes. Honorable member for Freetown, can you, on first reading of bill, can you present the bill that you are
I'll do it again.
you're requesting to be read for the first time?
Yes. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the Civil Aviation Bill 2021. Second. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Once again, Mr. Speaker, third time lucky. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to repeal and replace the Civil Aviation Act 2016 to modernize the regulation of civil aviation in the Bahamas in accordance with the Chicago Convention and for connected purposes. Second.
Thank you. Order that the notice be brought up. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Civil Aviation Act 2016 to modernize the regulation of civil aviation in the Bahamas in accordance with the Chicago Convention and for connected purposes. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time.
Bill for an act to repeal and replace the Civil Aviation Act 2016 to modernize the regulation of civil aviation in the Bahamas in accordance with the Chicago Convention and for connected purposes.
Further first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to provide for the continuation of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas as the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas, its functions and composition, and for matters connected thereto.
Order that the notice be brought up. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. A bill for an act to provide for the continuation of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas as the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas, its functions and composition, and for matters connected thereto. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time.
A bill for an act to provide for the continuation of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas as the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas, its functions and composition, and for matters connected thereto.
Further first reading of bills.
Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill to establish a separate Bahamas Air Navigation Services Authority with its functions and composition.
Order that the notice be brought up. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. A bill to establish a separate Bahamas Air Navigation Services Authority with its functions and composition. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time.
A bill for an act to establish a separate Bahamas Air Navigation Services Authority with its functions and composition.
Further first reading of bills.
No further. No further first reading.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
No further first reading. There are no further first readings, Mr. Speaker.
Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the Whole, House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise to move to debate on the resolution. At the end, I will read the resolution into the record, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as Prime Minister, the greatest values I hold dear are the protection of human life, the promotion of human dignity, and the common good. I hold these values deep in my heart, Mr. Speaker, and in my soul. As a person of faith, I believe that every human being, no matter the circumstance of birth or life circumstance, is wonderfully made in the image and likeness of Almighty God. Every human being possesses the same dignity and should enjoy the same protections of their country. The most fundamental right of every human being is the right to life. Such a life, Mr. Speaker, such a right is a gift from God. This right is enshrined in our Constitution in the protection of the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual. In our democracy, the right to life must be protected and preserved through the actions and policies of the government of the day. During the COVID-19 pandemic, my government used every measure possible, including healthcare and emergency measures as provided for by our Constitution to preserve, to protect, and to defend human life. Mr. Speaker, when I became a medical doctor, I took a solemn oath known as the Hippocratic Oath. This is an oath taken by all medical doctors. One version of this oath states, I quote, I will remember that I remain a member of society with special obligations to all my fellow human beings. I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure. Through the emergency orders, Mr. Speaker, we have sought to prevent death, illness, and suffering. And without these orders, there would have been many more deaths. With these orders, we have protected the Bahamian people. What we have done has been morally right and constitutionally right. In the Bahamas, the proclamation of emergency and Parliament's authorization of emergency powers grant government of the day the legal authority to act to protect the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, as we approach nearly a year of this deadly pandemic in our Bahamas, I recall the spirit and legacy of Dr. B.J. Nottage, who passed away in 2016. And I must remind this House, Mr. Speaker, that as a then young doctor in training at the Princess Margaret Hospital, Dr. B.J. Nottage was my mentor and teacher. I asked myself, what would B.J. have done as a doctor, as a member of Parliament, and as a cabinet minister if faced with the worst pandemic in 100 years? It is my sincere belief that as a medical doctor and as a man of conscience and compassion, BJ would have used every tool possible to save lives and prevent illness, including measures in the emergency proclamation. At BJ's official funeral in 2016, Mr. Speaker, I said of my colleague and friend, I quote, "His life was as simple and uncomplicated as his initials. No big fanfare. He became a medical doctor, not just to care for the sick, but to help the young and strong to remain healthy and to enjoy long, fulfilling lives. He aided the miracle of birth and presided over the delivery into this world of hundreds, if not thousands, of babies. I also told the story of a delivery where the baby was tragically stillborn. The attending nurses heard the understandable crying from the delivery room of a man who was in pain. And when the nurse went in to comfort the family and the weeping father, she discovered that it was BJ who was in tears alongside the grief-stricken couple. Mr. Speaker, such was the passion of BJ for his profession and for his patients. He was a man of deep compassion. He was a patriot who loved our people. In addition to being an obstetrician gynecologist like myself, he had another calling, which inspired me and many others. Both of us had the privilege of serving as Minister of Health. BJ was drawn to politics and public service because he saw it as a means to deliver for more Bahamians on a grander scale. He knew when to put partisanship aside for the national and the greater good. I believe that this pandemic would have been one of those moments in history. I believe, Mr. Speaker, he would have worked across the aisle in a spirit of love and unity to protect the lives of our people from this deadly virus. Both BJ and I, Mr. Speaker, understand the struggle and the difficult decisions involved in saving and protecting the lives of mothers. We know what it is like to help to bring new life into the world. And we knew the pain of death of a patient. Mr. Speaker, my government and I use data and the advice of the medical experts to inform our decision-making. In this pandemic, we do not make decisions for political gain. We do not engage in irresponsible, magical thinking. It is important for us, Mr. Speaker, to base our analysis of the crisis in facts and reality. And currently, for large parts of the world, right now is the worst of the pandemic. Countries are struggling with record cases, hospitalizations, and death. Scientists predicted that the winter in the Northern Hemisphere would be difficult. And sadly, their predictions were correct. Some of our Caribbean neighbors and friends are seeing record numbers. Europe and America have been hit hard. There is resurgence of the virus in Asia. South Africa is having difficulties too. In Zimbabwe, 4 cabinet ministers have now died from COVID-19. In some jurisdictions, amidst record surges, ambulances were told only to bring to hospital COVID-19 patients who had a reasonable chance of survival. Hospitals have had to convert nearly every bit of space into COVID-19 wards, including garages. And that has only partially helped. While it is easy to set up more beds, there are a limited number of medical professionals to care for the sick. And some medical systems have outright collapsed. Patients' families, Mr. Speaker, have had to find oxygen tanks for their loved ones because supplies ran out because of the overwhelming number of people in need. And some of these scenes are playing out in rich and powerful countries, some in the developing world. Surges, Mr. Speaker, are particularly dangerous for small island developing states such as ours because of limited hospital space and medical staff. And this deadly and highly infectious virus is testing every country on the planet. It is truly a global health emergency with record cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in so many countries. Global travel is again being curtailed. The slow importation of the virus around the world, there are new travel restrictions coming into force, or the outright closure of borders. Whereas existing versions of the virus are already quite infectious, mutations are making matters even worse. Mr. Speaker, several dangerous variants have been discovered. Scientists have said some are significantly more infectious than other versions of the virus. There are also concerns that they may be even more deadly. And further analysis, Mr. Speaker, is needed to confirm whether or not this is the case. With the global COVID-19 emergency being at its worst, countries are reimposing aggressive restrictions to stop the spread of the virus and, most importantly, save lives. For example, much of Western Europe is under some form of heavy restrictions or outright lockdown that has or will last for a month or even longer. These powerful, rich, and scientifically advanced countries are having a difficult time fighting the virus and its variants in winter when people are indoors. Mr. Speaker, During my training as a physician, we were taught to act to save lives, to lessen suffering, and to care for the sick. When the pandemic began, those lessons were paramount in my mind. My government and I would not just say things to be popular. We would not just do the popular thing to make everybody and everyone happy in the moment. We wanted to advance policies and rules to keep Bahamians healthy and, most importantly, alive. If at times some of these rules were unpopular, as a doctor and prime minister, I was prepared to deliver the bitter medicine to keep our people well. Our founders, Mr. Speaker, knew times such as these would emerge, times of true crisis and emergency that would test our resolve as a people. The emergency measures we enacted, which we seek to extend, are legal powers designed for moments such as these. Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic is the worst crisis in our modern history. It has killed our family, friends, and neighbors, all of whom we continue to mourn. Speaker, I gave an example of just one of my brothers the other day. I want to give this house another example. Just a few months ago, another of my brother had passed away in Florida. I was unable to attend the funeral because of COVID-19. They had set up a Zoom funeral, Mr. Speaker, and because of my involvement in the COVID pandemic here in the Bahamas, I knew I could not attend the Zoom meeting on time. And they made provisions at the end of the funeral for me to bring my remarks via Zoom at the end. I spoke to his wife and children, extended my regret of not being present or not being able to attend, but reassured them that at the end of this pandemic, I will be able to travel and express my true feelings. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 has caused exceptional harm to our economy. You can see, Mr. Speaker, what it is doing around the world. The official death toll is more than 2 million, with around 100 million confirmed cases. In the United States of America, more than 400,000 individuals have died, and it's projected that by the end of this month, that would be in excess of 500,000. Mr. Speaker, we have a population of 400,000, and if we were to follow that course or pattern, every Bahamian within the Bahamas would have been dead. However, it is thought that these numbers underestimate the lives lost and people infected. Bahamians know, Mr. Speaker, this is an emergency. Bahamians know that in extraordinary times, extraordinary measures must be taken to save lives. The measures we seek to extend are not per se a particular measure or set of measures. They give the government the ability to act, to preserve public health. We have used these measures to ensure masks are worn. We have used these measures, Mr. Speaker, to prevent mass gatherings, which serve as super spreader events. And these measures, Mr. Speaker, help us to stop the first wave at the beginning of the pandemic. These measures helped us to stop the second wave, which was even more severe. And we need these measures, Mr. Speaker, to continue to keep Bahamians safe. Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear with this point. The pandemic is not over. Though there's light on the horizon, because vaccines are slowly starting to reach more countries, we still have a long way to go before we get back to normal. The Bahamas has had many months of low COVID-19 numbers. Our health guidelines are working. The emergency measures, Mr. Speaker, are working. And the Bahamian people are complying with the rules. I commend the Bahamian people for their discipline. We must remain disciplined to keep the numbers low. We must also be realistic. With new strains circulating, it is quite possible for us to have additional waves before our population is vaccinated. We cannot, Mr. Speaker, under any circumstances, let our guard down. I repeat, so that Bahamian people may hear and understand. It may be painful, but we cannot let our guard down. The more we abide by the measures, the more we prevent a greater resurgence of the virus. We cannot become complacent and think the pandemic is over just because we have had a few good months. Mr. Speaker, when we last extended these measures, I was shocked and disappointed by the opposition. In the middle of the worst emergency in our modern history, the opposition opposed the legal emergency measures we use to save lives. Their opposition to life-saving measures was one of the lowest points in that party's history. Let us think for a moment, Mr. Speaker, what their opposition to the emergency order would have meant. If there were no emergency orders, we could not mandate the wearing of masks and other life-saving measures. This could have led to many more infections and illnesses. This could have led to many more deaths. This could have led. Listen, Governor.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkin, San Salvador. On a point of order.
I'm trying to understand, right, to this one problem. Is the Prime Minister indicating that he would not have been able to mandate life-saving measures such as wearing a mask, washing your hands, right, social distancing without the
proclamation of emergency. Is that what he said? Huh? Is that what he said? I just want to clear that up. No. That is it. That is not true. It's not correct. His own Attorney General has suggested how it should be done. And I'll speak to it.
The opposition is a lawyer. He knows exactly what I meant. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Honorable
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker,
honorable member,
Mr. Speaker, you will have your
honorable
time.
member for Cat Island, Rumpkin, San Salvador. You rise on a point of order. State the point of order.
The point of order is that the Prime Minister is misleading this country to suggest, right, that the opposition, that this opposition, right, is opposing life-saving measures that could have only been enacted through his state of emergency proclamation being extended. We say that is not true. His own Attorney General does not agree with that.
That's not what he said.
Right?
Mr. Speaker.
And that's what I'm saying.
Mr. Speaker,
The Speaker recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
That's not what he said.
Mr. Speaker, the orders allowed many
The pandemic.
emergency matters to be enacted, and the orders allowed for the government to act quickly. The opposition knows.
Honorable
The
members,
opposition knows that the orders do not confine.
honorable members,
Extension.
the member for Kalani has the floor. Honorable member for North Avaco
Mr. Speaker,
and Cat Island, the member
Speaker.
for Kalani has the floor.
That's where you are today.
if there were,
Who would say that? Look at what Joe
If-
Biden is doing
Honorable member,
around the world.
honorable member for Yamakro.
Not the pandemic. Not saying since the first, second World War. Listen to nonsense you're talking. No, come on, man. You should know better.
stop that clock.
Honorable member for Kalani, you may continue.
You got half an hour, you know. If there were no emergency measures, Mr. Speaker, then everyone could have had mass gatherings such as parties and huge weddings, crowded clubs could have been packed, and people face to face all night. Mr. Speaker, I hope the opposition, when he speaks, he would talk about how he wanted clubs and liquor and bars to be open and individuals to enjoy themselves while we were suffering from a pandemic. I hope he would expound. If a surge emerged,
The chair recognizes, honorable member, I am trying to recognize you.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkin, and San Salvador.
Thank you.
On a point of order.
Speaker, the Prime Minister is incorrect that I suggested that bars be open, but so bars could be opened for say. What I said is level the playing field
and open
Stop.
bars.
and stop favoring his special interest donors. He allowed a bar to
What
open
bar?
the bar. You explained that the bar was part of the hotel and it was not.
It's part of the whole.
It is not. It is not.
There is
Every
such a
behavior
thing-
knows
there is
that
such
the
a
bar,
thing as Hotel Encouragement Act, and you are well aware of it, and you know that was a part of it.
the bar,
You have the
bar
data,
that he
you
allowed
can
to
look
open
at it.
own
So don't try to
Not Island House.
mislead this out.
Island House.
You wanted
The Island
the
House.
bars open
The
so
Island
that
House.
individuals can go in, drink, dance, and dine.
Mr. Speaker,
You
what I
wanted
wanted,
the healing to
what
die.
I wanted
You
was a
said
level playing
yourself.
field. Mr. Speaker, what I wanted was a level playing field. That's what I wanted. I didn't want the competent authority to favor his donors, his special donors, who has a liquor license.
Honorable
be
member,
able to sell liquor,
honorable member,
and the poor man
honorable
over there
member.
who has a bar
honorable member for Cat Island,
was not
Rumpkin,
able
and
to
San
do that.
Salvador.
That's what I said.
You will
That's
have
the
your
point I made.
opportunity.
I continue to
when-
make it. You're favoring
Honorable member
your
for Cat
donors
Island, Rumpkin, and San Salvador.
just outside of Life and Key. Island House has the
Honorable
hotel
member.
license.
Honorable member. Honorable members. we want to have a orderly debate, and I want honorable members on both sides to respect the chair. Each member will have the opportunity to debate. When you rise on a point of order, it's not an opportunity for you to carry on a discourse and debate at that time. There's no but, honorable member. Thank you.
And the leader of the opposition should not get near talk but over the hill for which they have ignored for so long, and change are now coming. I spoke of the Hippocratic Oath. We do not discriminate. That is my training. And that is why growing up in areas like Over the Hill, we will ensure that Over the Hill is elevated to where it should be. That is why we made it a free tax zone.
First Prime Minister to do it. First administration to do it. Over the Hill tax-free zone.
Mr. Speaker, if a surge...
Engliston is happy.
Engliston, you know we love you. I can bring that bill for you. Just for you, not for him.
Engliston will be included.
Long Island brought water for him. I'll bring tax-free for you. Mr. Speaker, if a surge emerged... Mr. Speaker,
we need to record Engliston.
If a surge emerged on an island under the opposition policy, we would have no authority to act quickly to prevent the spread. A government under the direction of leader of the opposition would sit and watch disaster. You want to interfere? You want to speak? By opposing the emergency measures, Mr. Speaker, the opposition was advancing a policy of chaos, a policy of sickness, and a policy of death. It is sad to see the position that party has taken in such a crisis. We are acting, Mr. Speaker, and making the tough decisions to save lives. Yet, they oppose us at every turn, just trying to be popular. Their reckless and irresponsible positions are dangerous to our country. Governments are elected, Mr. Speaker, to be defenders of the people's interests, not panderers to the whims of the day. The policies by government advanced these 10+ months have worked to beat back waves of the virus and save Bahamians. As a result, our country is currently one of the countries doing better from a health perspective. And the opposition, Mr. Speaker, would not even acknowledge this success. Their tactics is to politicize everything and to oppose for opposing's sake. As a government, we take advice from the best Bahamian experts, led by Dr. Dal Regis and the medical team at the Ministry of Health. We have a good team all Bahamians should be proud of, Mrs. Speaker. We also consult widely with the private sector, civic organizations, and religious leaders. Yet, at the beginning of the crisis, the opposition set up its own COVID-19 group under their party political branding. That, Mr. Speaker, was a disgraceful act that demonstrated political gain
is what they are about more than anything else. The Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker, are fortunate that it is this side and not them that is in power during these difficult times. Mr. Speaker, as we have throughout the pandemic, my government will continue to use this authority responsibly. Currently, in many of our islands, there are few to no restrictions. Bahamians are mostly able to go about their lives with few restrictions because our numbers are currently low. We only use restrictions to slow the virus when there is a problem. We strike a balance between the need to keep Bahamians safe and the need for people to make a living. The tightening and loosening policy has worked. It will take various behaviors and innovations to end the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccinations, new medications, new rapid tests, and continued masking will all play roles in concluding this difficult period. And until then, Mr. Speaker, we must remain committed to the public health guidelines that has protected us thus far. As I stand here, Mr. Speaker, I am so proud of the Bahamian people. When I go out, I see widespread compliance with the guidelines. Though, as I stated in the House on Monday, there are those who are not following the necessary measures. And I once again note that large gatherings like funerals and Junkanoo rush outs have the potential to be super spreader events. There have been a number of large funerals reported in the press lately. I encourage the authorities to ensure that Bahamians and residents are complying with the emergency measures. Mr. Speaker, I must give thanks to God for bringing us this far, and I ask the nation to continue to pray that God would continue to deliver us. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce today that following a reassessment by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Bahamas will be moved down to level 3 travel health notice from the more serious level 4. And this reassessment came after discussions between myself, other Bahamian officials, and the U.S. government. We will, I believe, be moved to level 3 because the CDC sees how much progress we have made and are convinced that we will continue to be vigilant. A part of this vigilance is the availability of quick emergency measures we can use because of the emergency orders. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate the distribution of vaccines, the National COVID-19 Vaccine Consultative Committee has been established to advise the Ministry of Health's National Immunization Technical Working Group, which tackles the technical components of the introduction of vaccines. The National COVID-19 Vaccine Consultative Committee will hold a press conference next week to provide more details of the distribution plan and an update on vaccines. So if you have any debate about where's the plan, scratch that line out. The consultative committee, Mr. Speaker, is led by Dr. Merslin Dahl Regis, Special Health Advisor to the Prime Minister. The committee, Mr. Speaker, is made up of members from the public and private sectors, medical professionals, civil society, religious, and community leaders. And today, I wish to provide the House with a general update on COVID-19 vaccines. Given the global impact of the pandemic and the urgent need for COVID-19 vaccines, unprecedented financial resources and scientific collaborations have been poured into the safe and effective development of a vaccine using the same strict clinical and safety standards. The Bahamas government, Mr. Speaker, is working on all fronts to secure the COVID-19 vaccine through the COVAX facility and with the assistance of World Health Organization and PAHO. The Bahamas has presumptively secured enough doses to vaccinate 20% of our population once available. And I'm certain that the Minister of Health would speak to that. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, is also looking to accessing vaccines through the African Medical Supplies Platform via CARICOM. And the government has also made direct contact with providers of approved vaccines. I wish to assure Bahamians that the vaccines approved for use in the Bahamas have met the strict and rigorous standards of the World Health Organization. The vaccine, Mr. Speaker, will not be mandatory. And so far, approved vaccines will only be administered to adults. The vaccine will be free of charge to all eligible adults who choose to take it. Which vaccines will be used and exactly when they will arrive in country is still being worked out. To ensure all Bahamians and residents who choose to take the vaccine can be vaccinated safely and quickly, extensive plans are underway to ensure a safe and effective rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine throughout the Bahamas. The national rollout of the COVID-19 will be one of the greatest logistical challenges that the country has ever undertaken. The national distribution plan covers distribution at the national district and family islands, training and capacity building, implementation of an electronic immunization registry, administration of the COVID-19 vaccine, vaccine logistics and storage management, communications and social mobilization, and monitoring and supervision. Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind the House that last week we advised that effective Sunday past 24th January 2021, pharmacies, gas stations, and laundromats may now operate between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. on New Providence and outdoor. Outdoor dining and restaurants is also permitted on Sundays between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. on New Providence and Abaco. Speaker, in November 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 by Clause 9 provided that all persons employed within the public service, unless specifically designated as essential workers, shall work remotely from home. Further, all persons employed within the public service who are so designated as essential workers by the Permanent Secretary of the respective ministry shall report to their place of work. Since March 2020, agencies of government were permitted to make adjustments to their staff complement in the workplace. This decision was taken in the interest of the safety and well-being of individuals in the workplace due to the pandemic and the uncertainties related thereto, while continuing to deliver service. Many public offices, Mr. Speaker, have continued to function from their places of work in reduced numbers and on shift system. Others are working remotely from home and are fully engaged. We will now review the situation and current arrangements for the conduct of work by public officers and for their orderly and safe return to the workplace. Such a review, Mr. Speaker, will incorporate the required COVID-19 health protocols and advise the relevant health authorities. Specific consideration will be given to the nature of the work environment and physical workspaces, the specific concerns of employees related to any personal extenuating health issues, and in consultation with the respective trade unions. The return of employees to their places of work will commence as early as 1st of February 2021. Permanent secretaries and heads of department will communicate with employees regarding the operational protocols specific to their circumstances. I wish to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that the safety and well-being of all employees in public service, their families, and all citizens and residents remain my and our highest priority. Mr. Speaker, in noting that the Bahamas could experience a very difficult third wave in the pandemic, a member of this honorable House said in an interview with one of the daily newspapers a few weeks ago, I quote, "I think that every country needs to be constantly reassessing its approach, if not on a weekly basis, certainly as often as is possible." End quote. I agree with this, Mr. Speaker, which is why we are remaining vigilant and on alert. The member also stated, and I quote, "So we have to remain vigilant because certainly for the next 6 to 12 months, COVID is going to be very much a part of the reality of every single country on the face of this planet." End quote. Because COVID-19 will be with us for some time, the government of the Bahamas, like governments all over the world, has at its disposal emergency measures which can quickly be used. Mr. Speaker, the availability of these emergency orders is like having life-saving measures such as medicine, equipment, and personnel at a hospital. A hospital has an intensive care unit, accident and emergency, oxygen supplies, painkillers, analgesics, antibiotics, and other medicine and emergency supplies, waiting and ready for whatever emergency arises and at whatever time of the day or night. While all of these measures may not be used by an individual, they are there. They are kept, Mr. Speaker, in case of an emergency. That is why doctors are on standby to perform surgery or other life-saving measures and operations. Emergency orders, Mr. Speaker, are similar. While many of them may not be used, they are there in case of an emergency.
The measures are there in case our COVID numbers go up quickly. People don't prepare for a hurricane after it comes or is right at your doorsteps. The reason we prepare for hurricanes, including getting together food and medical supplies, sandbags, candles, and batteries, and boarding up homes and buildings, is in the case a hurricane hits. If a hurricane does not hit, at least, thank God, we were spared. But if it hits, and people have taken precautions and emergency measures, life can be saved, and many people can avoid injuries. These emergency measures, Mr. Speaker, are one way of being prepared, hoping for the best, and preparing for the worst. Because of these measures and the discipline and courage of Bahamian people, the Bahamas is doing better than most countries in the world. We have some of the least restrictions being used today, and we are freer in this regard than much, if not most, of the world. In honor of those who have passed away and in honor of our healthcare and frontline workers, let us continue to be vigilant in protecting each other. We continue to pray for those who have lost loved ones and those who are in hospital or recovering from the virus. The world continues to admire and to mark the manner of our bearing as a free, proud, sovereign people as we continue to navigate wide and treacherous shores. Mr. Speaker, it is with a good and clear conscience and with abiding admiration for the Bahamian people that I wholly and resolutely support the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. Voting against these measures would be like being against food assistance, the unemployment assistance, and the economic assistance put in place by my government. All of these measures, including the emergency measures, were absolutely necessary as part of a comprehensive response to one of the gravest emergencies in our history. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the Bahamian people in this Parliament that we have extended the unemployment benefit to the end of January of this year, and we have ensured that individuals who had not made contributions, they too had benefited. Because after all, Mr. Speaker, they are Bahamians. And the unemployment benefits will be extended furthermore to the end of February. Depending on the circumstances, if necessary, we would review the situation and possibly extend it again, as we've done with our food assistance program. Mr. Speaker, may God bless this House and its members, including, I take that back. Let us continue to pray to Almighty God for courage, for wisdom. I didn't say anything. And I doubt you can read my mind. You wouldn't want to get in my head. When you see it go in my head, you say, oh my God, let me get out here. Let us continue to pray to Almighty God, Mrs. Speaker, for courage, for wisdom, and for resilience. Let us pray for grace, and let us pray for guidance. Let us always give thanks to the God who gives life and grants us mercy. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Speaker. Speaker, I thank you, and I so move. Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purpose of that article exists in the Bahamas. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House approves the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. And affirms the continuance in effect of Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I arise today in the strength of Almighty God, for in him we live, move, and have our being. Mr. Speaker, the Apostle Paul went on to say in 2 Corinthians 2:14 that thanks be to God who always leads us to triumph in Christ and uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of him everywhere. Mr. Speaker, this scripture I see as ample description of our journey through the first and second waves of COVID-19 in the Bahamas. For indeed, Mr. Speaker, the Lord has led us to triumph, and we thank him. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the good people of Bamboo Town to second the motion of the member for Kalani, the Honorable Prime Minister, to extend the emergency orders till the 23rd day of May, 2021. The Prime Minister just gave beautiful, descriptive information of the date piece as to where we were, where we are, where we came from, and where we're going in regards to this COVID fight. Mr. Speaker, complacency is a blight that saps energy, dulls attitudes, and causes brain drain. The first symptom is satisfaction with things as they are. The second is the rejection of things as they might be. Good enough becomes today's watchword and tomorrow's standard. These are the winsome words penned by twin brothers Alex and Brett Harris, who co-authored 2 books by the age of 21. In their book, Do Hard Things, they encourage teenagers not to go with the flow, but to accept challenges that will stretch limits and expand skill sets. Mr. Speaker, this is the attitude we have to maintain when dealing with this ferocious pandemic. We cannot go with the flow. We must accept challenges to explore and grasp better ideas, then grow. We cannot sit back and wait for results, Mr. Speaker. We must continue to think outside of the box to drive the results we wish to continuously achieve. And this, Mr. Speaker, in fact, is what we have done in the Bahamas, with the Bahamas now becoming a model for other countries. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has been placed on many a list over the years. Some not so good, and others glowing. I am pleased to advise the Bahamian people that we have now been recognized amongst 27 countries by an independent body of scientists as one of the countries who have gotten it right in our COVID-19 fight. This, Mr. Speaker, gives further credence to the efforts of us all to flatten the curve of the second wave and minimize the spread of the virus in a sustained way by collectively following the public health measures. Mr. Speaker, indeed, our emergency orders, travel protocols in country, testing protocols, model has been adopted by first world countries with large pools of intellect and many more financial capabilities, as was stated earlier by the Prime Minister. It is in fact that our neighbors to the north has now taken our example and is in full implementation mode thereof. This mindset, the mindset of our creative and innovative approach to COVID-19, is extremely important at this time, Mr. Speaker. As the Prime Minister also said, the pandemic is not over. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on complacency, he said, "This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for rigorous and positive action." And Mr. Speaker, this F&M administration has engaged in both. Mr. Speaker, I just quoted Martin Luther King Jr. But in regard to the challenges we face in this pandemic, COVID-19, I want to and will now quote a colleague in this place who I believe captures the moment. I quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic is already characterized as the defining global health challenge of our time and the greatest challenge we have faced since World War II. Countries are again heavily involved in imposing border restrictions, limiting travel, scaling up testing, treating the infected, and quarantining those that pose a risk. Conversations about inventories of medical supplies such as masks, gloves, personal protective equipment, and ventilators are the order of the day. Large gatherings have been canceled, contact tracing has become a household term, and schools have been limited to the confines of the home. COVID-19 has touched just about every continent on the planet except Antarctica. It has already threatened to leave very deep wounds and scars of social, economic, and political crisis. Mr. Speaker, the world has never seen anything like this. The world is in uncharted territory, and the Bahamas is not exempted." End quote. That, Mr. Speaker, was the former Minister of Health, the member for Elizabeth, Dr. Dwayne Sands, who stated that in this place on Monday, April the 6th, 2020. Mr. Speaker, with more than 98 million confirmed cases and over 2 million deaths worldwide, and still counting, indeed, that quote concerning the COVID-19 menace has borne out and will long be remembered, Mr. Speaker. This COVID-19 menace will long be remembered as a global game changer. Mr. Speaker, facing those kinds of challenges, what did we as a government do? The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with international health regulation, IHR obligations, has long had protocols to prevent, protect against, control, and provide a public health response to the international spread of disease. With the emergence of the novel coronavirus, noting the gravity of what was eventually renamed SARS-CoV-2, the virus causing COVID-19, a multi-sector task force was convened in January of 2020 of last year, 1 year ago, to bolster our readiness in every sphere and on every island. At that time, Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Transport and Local Government, I was happy to lend my support to the efforts of the Ministry of Health. On the 15th of March 2020, after the first case of COVID-19 was diagnosed in the Bahamas, the Health Emergency Operation Committee, the EOC, was fully convened. This is a good time to acknowledge and to thank members of the EOC who met on a daily basis for months to guide the decision-making of government. As I indicated, they met every single day, including weekends, to have intellectual conversations, formulate conclusions, to guide policy and procedure, and act on those decisions. For indeed, Mr. Speaker, the creative and intellectual mindset spoken to earlier was the cauldron of health's EOC, from which cultivation, preparation, and launch took place. Mr. Speaker, the gratitude of the Bahamian people, the government, and that of mine, this minister, for our health professionals' exemplary work in saving lives cannot be measured. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the collaboration among team members and the agencies they represent continues and remains unprecedented. Their dedication to duty on behalf of the people of the Bahamas may oftentimes seem thankless, but they press on through though weary, continuing to convene even now, though less frequent, so as not to neglect their priority health matters, which many have been placed on the back burners to contain the first and second wave outbreaks. Mr. Speaker, I dare say, we do not want a third wave here at home. There's too much at stake in our nation in regards to our health and economic prospects. We must continue to contain this virus. Mr. Speaker, in the first wave of this pandemic, a number of healthcare workers volunteered their services. These men and women took their positions at the front lines and stood on the wall. They treated the sick, comforted the weak, and prepared the dead to receive their last respects. Many of our healthcare workers have faced great odds, found new thresholds, and overcame adversities they never thought they would face. They have learned more about themselves through the COVID-19 ordeal. Just as Mahatma Gandhi advised, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And indeed, those in the healthcare sector and on the front line have done exactly that during this first and second wave in combating this virus. Mr. Speaker, our experience in the second wave of this pandemic was more intense than that of the first. We faced bigger challenges. There were a greater number of COVID-19 cases. In the first wave, we had 104 cases. In the second wave to date, we have had 8,140 cases. However, Mr. Speaker, the curve has and is flattening. Mr. Speaker, more persons were seriously ill during the second wave. There were higher numbers of hospitalization and dwindling bed and ICU capacity for COVID and non-COVID patients. Mr. Speaker, other nations have not fared so well during their second wave in flattening the curve. Indeed, much grief and despair has been experienced globally, and as I said earlier, even in our own beautiful country. But as the Prime Minister said, thanks be to God, the institution of sustained as well as intermittent containment and mitigation measures, those emergency orders which drove public health measures, has now permitted a measure of normalcy to be achieved with glimpses of our pre-COVID-19 days. Mr. Speaker, thanks to those measures, total confirmed cases as of January 25th, again now stands at 8,140. 83%, 6,746 have recovered. New cases have remained less than 20 cases daily for the past month, with a 7-day moving average of 9 cases. Down 9 cases, Mr. Speaker, down from a high of 109 at our peak back in October of 2020. Hospitalizations, Mr. Speaker, declined to a low of 3 on January 10th. It rebounds slightly, and stabilization took place in low digits. The number of hospitalizations currently holds at 12 as of yesterday. Mr. Speaker, there are 0 COVID-19 patients hospitalized in Grand Bahama Healthcare System. In New Providence, there are 0 hospitalized COVID-19 patients at Doctors Hospital at this time. There's 1 COVID-19 patient being treated at South Beach Acute Referral and Care Center. At Princess Margaret Hospital, there are 5 moderately ill patients with COVID-19 and no patients currently in ICU. At the Sandens Rehabilitation Center, there are 6 COVID-19 patients. Measures put in place at Sandens Rehabilitation Center has ensured, Mr. Speaker, that we continue to contain the virus there. Mr. Speaker, currently in our country, COVID-19 deaths remains at 175, with the last death being a 62-year-old male on December the 31st, 2020. Mr. Speaker, 15 deaths are still under investigation. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the Bahamian people that the Bahamas, again, entered its second wave of COVID earlier than other countries. And we have now, again, as I said, flattened our curve. The Bahamian people, government of the Bahamas, health officials, healthcare workers, frontline workers have done a fantastic job in curbing the spread of the virus in this second wave, getting the results we are now experiencing. We must now, more than ever, adhere to the measures put in place to save lives and regain fully our livelihoods and economic prospects. Mr. Speaker, we, in spite of the strides we have made in the war against this invisible enemy, SARS-CoV-2 virus, again, I say we cannot rest on our laurels. We must keep up our guards. Other countries around the world remain in their second wave, and some are now experiencing a third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. The United Kingdom is in full lockdown. Scotland until February at the earliest. England until the 31st of March. Wales is up for review at the end of January. And Northern Ireland is extended until the 5th of March. Lockdowns, Mr. Speaker, are occurring in the United Kingdom even in the midst of vaccine deployment there. Mr. Speaker, Germany is in a lockdown until mid-February, with deaths having increased to an average of 1,000 deaths a day for weeks. All of this happening while Germany is deploying the Pfizer vaccine. Mr. Speaker, with Nightly curfew currently in place in metropolitan France. There are reports of calls in France now for a third lockdown to contain the virus as hospitalization increased sharply there. Mr. Speaker, in our own neighborhood, our neighbors to the north, the US and Canada have also instituted more stringent measures to contain the rapid spread of COVID-19. As of yesterday, the 26th of January, all travelers entering the US must now have a negative COVID-19 test result. Canada now requires a negative COVID test result with a mandatory 14-day quarantine or isolation. To the south, in the Caribbean, Prime Minister Mia Mottley in Barbados, the leader of the opposition said we should have looked at Barbados, so we can look at Barbados. To the south in the Caribbean, the Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados has announced that effective February the 3rd through the 17th, the island will enter a period of national pause. In other words, a lockdown. Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate, using these examples, Mr. Speaker, this pandemic is not over. Mr. Speaker, controlling the transmission of COVID-19 requires a combination of strategies. And we've implemented a lot of them. One part of that strategy is testing. The Ministry of Health's testing protocols has not changed. The RT-PCR test remains the gold standard in country to diagnose COVID-19. Rapid antigen tests have been added to our testing guide by the national protocol. Despite being less sensitive, the RT-PCR test, despite being less sensitive than the RT-PCR test, rapid antigen testing is relatively inexpensive and provides rapid results. This type of testing has the potential to provide wider access to COVID-19 testing at an acceptable turnaround time when there is limited access to RT-PCR testing. Currently, Mr. Speaker, there are 2 antigen tests that have been granted World Health Organization emergency use. That is the SD Biosensor and the Abbott Pan Bio Rapid Antigen Test. Both of these tests have been independently validated and found to have high sensitivity and specificity in symptomatic persons. The only drawback is that there are currently no published studies of the rapid antigen test performance in asymptomatic populations. Mr. Speaker, in regards to the rapid antigen testing, the ministry continues to monitor adherence to its protocol. I anticipate, Mr. Speaker, that we will achieve 100% compliance with the US new testing protocol requirement that all individuals entering the United States must have a negative COVID test. Mr. Speaker, to make COVID-19 tests available to a wider cross-section of Bahamians, we continue to explore other testing strategies. The saliva test for COVID-19 is an alternative to the current nasal swabbing protocol. The saliva test is an easy alternative to testing symptomatic and asymptomatic persons by RT-PCR. This test is a streamlined version of the RT-PCR test. That is because it is cheaper than the currently used swab-based RT-PCR. It does not involve swabbing the nose or throat of people, and it does not require viral extraction in the lab. The saliva samples are easily obtained and stored at refrigerated temperature for 1 week. A swab can only be preserved for 3 days. This method offers benefits to our family islands for easy storage and transport. Despite the Ethics Committee approval for the saliva direct test to undergo an evaluation, by being piloted within the Family Islands, there has been pause in the pilot study. Initially planned to target asymptomatic positive persons, the study has now been paused due to the successful decline in the number of new positive cases in country. The protocol is now being revised and adapted to our new improved reality. Mr. Speaker, the National Reference Lab, ran by the progeny of the member for Engliston, will present its findings and recommendation as it relates to the performance of and potential future use of the saliva direct test at the end of the pilot. We hope to be able to utilize the saliva test to enhance access to testing in the community, as well as introduce greater cost efficiencies into the national testing policy in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, as of January 25th, a total of 58,730 RT-PCR tests have been carried out for COVID-19. 79 tests were performed on the 25th of January, with 7 positive and 77 negatives. This relates to a positivity rate of around 9%. The positivity 7-day average positivity rate for the past 2 weeks, however, Mr. Speaker, is 4%. For reference, WHO informs that a positivity rate below 5% indicate that the community spread is not occurring. It indicates that the spread of COVID-19 is contained. Mr. Speaker, this is a point of interest for a lot of folk, but Mr. Speaker, with the new variant of SARS-CoV-2 virus manifesting, the National Reference Lab has and is instituting genomic surveillance of variants of concerns, VOC. A protocol and database for the national genomic surveillance of circulating SARS-CoV-2 strains has been drafted and is being operationalized now. We have identified 2 reference laboratories to perform the genomic sequencing, that is CARFA and the PAHO Reference Lab in Rio de Janeiro. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking to send samples to the CDC as well for sequencing. Mr. Speaker, an initial 40 representative samples from throughout the Bahamian archipelago and spanning the first and second wave are en route as we speak to the Brazil Reference Lab for our first round of genomic surveillance, and results will be reported to the ministry and then on to the Bahamian people. The agreement with the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARFA, provided for up to 10 samples weekly. Sequencing data will give guidance to our ongoing public health response and will allow us to definitively know whether there are variant strains of COVID-19 present in the country. Mr. Speaker, surveillance, contact tracing continues to be an essential element of the COVID-19 fight. Alongside well-known and following public health measures of mask wearing, physical distancing, and sanitation, we have and continue to reap benefits from the institution of these measures. We must therefore continue to do our part in this country towards our nation's full recovery. Mr. Speaker, the government moved to train an additional 30 persons as contact tracers early in the second wave of the pandemic. While only 8 remain involved in the current daily contact tracing, a national registry has been created with over 100 persons who have been properly trained to contact trace. In addition, 16 of the 40 persons who have applied for contact tracing positions are now being considered for hiring to ensure our capacities are augmented to quickly and easily scale up public health response when needed. Mr. Speaker, if you are certain that you're in close contact with someone who has had COVID-19, I advise you to call the 511 hotline and relate the information. Mr. Speaker, with the consistent implementation of sustained measures, we are beginning to get a glimpse, only a glimpse, of a COVID-free Bahamas. Depending on the individual and collective behaviors we display, however, we can slip back into increasing hospitalization and possible death. even with the additions of 28 COVID-19 acute care beds in the Special Pathogens Unit at PMH and 15 at Doctors Hospital West, a third wave surge can be more challenging for us. Mr. Speaker, through numerous capacity building exercises, I would like to inform the Bahamian people that we now have around 150 beds in country, and we thank God for that achievement in our short 6 months time frame. Time, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to skip to the vaccine portion. Mr. Speaker, there will be some time ahead before we can fully enjoy a COVID-free nation again. With relaxed restrictions and opening of our mega hotels, we must adhere to the preventative measures more than we ever did before. The relaxation of the COVID-19 restrictions has given us greater freedoms, and the Prime Minister has relaxed some of them even here today. More interactions will occur in small gatherings, churches, and schools. We cannot fool ourselves into thinking that the virus is gone. It is still here, it moves when we move, and it will seek to infect every unsuspecting host with the potential to spread to others. Mr. Speaker, we need to continue in solidarity. Solidarity is the unity or agreement of feeling or action. It is mutually support within a group, especially among individuals with a common interest. When we do not have solidarity amongst ourselves, we lose the fight against COVID in our country. Mr. Speaker, in regards to COVID-19 vaccinations, we need solidarity. Mr. Speaker, for the first few months, the international community has witnessed the largest planned vaccination rollout in history. COVID-19 vaccination rollouts are occurring across multiple countries worldwide. As of the 25th of January, 68.4 million vaccinations have been reported. World Health Organization has identified COVID-19 as one of the top threats to human health. A post-COVID-19 Bahamas will not be possible without activating the fourth pillar of our response, which is vaccination of a sufficient number of Bahamians against COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, what gets measured gets done. The Pan-American Health Organization has established a COVID-19 vaccine introduction readiness tool, VRAC, dashboard for monitoring member states' progress with preparedness to receive vaccinations from the COVAX facility. Monthly submissions from the country inform reflected levels of readiness on the dashboard. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise that the Bahamas' readiness is reflecting the majority. 7 of 9 progress indicators are in the maturity stage, and the remaining 2 of those indicators have been completed. These indicators inform timing of access of countries to the in-country delivery of COVID-19 vaccine by the WHO. Mr. Speaker, this is to say that the Bahamas is well on its way to receiving the COVID-19 vaccine very, very soon. As I reported in my last communication, and the Prime Minister has intimated, the government of the Bahamas has committed to purchasing COVID-19 vaccine for 80,000 persons through the COVAX facility. Other opportunities for assessing the COVID-19 vaccinations are also being explored. With Pfizer, Moderna, Oxford, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson approved or in the advanced stages of development, securing access to additional vaccine is now possible. Equitable and efficient distribution of this vaccination once received is high on the agenda of the Ministry of Health, having already developed and obtained cabinet approval for the National COVID-19 Strategic Plan. The National Vaccine Consultative Committee is providing support to the Ministry of Health technical teams to ensure all areas of the rollout are clearly defined and resourced for rapid and efficient implementations once vaccines are in country. Mr. Speaker, having a vaccine, though, is only one piece of the puzzle. Getting vaccinated is another. In other words, having a vaccine is beneficial to no one if we do not roll up our sleeves to take the vaccine. Vaccines have saved lives for decades. The purpose of administering a vaccine is to induce protection from disease through the stimulation of an immune response to that disease. Mr. Speaker, vaccinations have saved lives for centuries. History records that in 1798, Mr. Speaker, if you could give me 2 minutes, I would appreciate that. Edward Jenner published his work on the development of a vaccine for smallpox. The last known naturally occurring case of smallpox was diagnosed on the 26th of January, 1977 in Merka, Somalia. No, according to the CDC. The World Health Organization, WHO, declared smallpox eradicated in 1980. It was eradicated solely through vaccination. Mr. Speaker, before the introductions of vaccines, many children became ill, disabled, or died as a result of contracting one of the vaccine-preventable diseases. With sustained high immunization coverage in the region of the Americas, was certified as free of rubella and congenital rubella in 2015, and free of indigenous measles in 2016. Mr. Speaker, I reiterate the availability and accessibility of vaccines and the safe and the quality vaccinations which have saved lives for decades. The government of the Bahamas, through the National Immunization Program, is agreeing.
Just a moment. Is that an indication that the 2 minutes is up, or? Honorable Member,
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to wrap up, and so I'll give the rest of my contribution during the wrap up. Thank you. You'll hear the rest.
Honorable Member, I'm not indicating that you should stop. How much time do you need?
Mr. Speaker, I would need just an additional 2 minutes just to finish. But Mr. Speaker, most of the vaccine information I would have already put forward. And so at the end of the day, I will address any other issues that come up during the wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas pursuant to Article 29, subsection 1 of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purpose of the article exists in the Bahamas. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approve the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. B, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. C, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. And D, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 23rd day of May 2021. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I first wish to extend again my appreciation to the fine people of Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador. And just for edification, Cat Island always had water. Remember who sits behind you and very often auditions for some reason or another you must have something good in store for him, Kalani. He grew up in Cat Island, and he knew he had water. And what is happening now, the laying of pipes, was something that
Honorable member. The member for Yamakro is on a point of order.
The good member for Cat Island is misleading this house. Whenever we speak now, we speak about a contemporary approach to doing things, digitization or whatever have you. Now, when he speaks about Cat Island having water, he's talking about going to the well with a bucket, and if
The member
the water is
indicated that
too
you
heavy,
were misleading.
you get a horse.
How is
with
the member misleading the House,
being
honorable member?
Very misleading, Mr. Speaker. What we're now talking about is being able to provide potable water through pipes, running water. That's what people want. You don't go deep down in the bush and get it out. And treated water, Mr. Speaker.
Shame that you would send people in the
It should
bush.
be a shame.
Send
And
people in the
Speaker,
bush.
very shortly, I shall give a presentation in this House, which will mark the good member for Cat Island as having a duck egg. And we know what that is. Zero. To get up and shame
Honorable member.
yes, it has water.
Honorable member.
It has water in the ground. We go get it in bucket. But people want it to be transported to their house, like he has water in
Honorable
Nassau.
member.
That's what Cat Islanders want.
That's what they want in Cat Island.
Thank you.
They want to come to pipe. Pipe water. That's what they want.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member. Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker,
Please resume your seat. The point
what
is taken.
I respond by saying this as well, that the number of homes in which pipes were run, where bucket was not necessary to go in the well anymore, is known to Cat Islanders, whose home I would have ensured that they got running water and indoor toilet is there. They know. That's why whatever they say doesn't faze the people of Cat Island, because they know, right? And so, Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members. Honorable member for Yamakro. Honorable member for Yamakro.
Speaker,
When you have your opportunity to speak, honorable member for Yamakro.
Speaker, Speaker, I do not, Speaker, I think, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member for Yamakro. You cannot,
Speaker.
honorable member for Cat Island, just a moment, please.
No, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Yamakro and all other members. You cannot simply speak loudly from your seat and be disruptive and disrespectful really to another member who is on his feet trying to make his presentation.
Yeah. Speaker, I listened very intently for the case that was being made by the member for Kalani for the extension of the proclamation of the state of emergency. Right? And when I listened, I just have to say that, Loretta was right when she wrote all those, when she described the member for Kalani. Yeah, she was right. One thing I know, she was right about the member for Kalani. Because, he is clearly a stranger to the truth. Clearly. And I say it in those parliamentary terms, not the one that I could afford to say. Now, let me start off by saying he hides himself behind the constitutionality of the extension of the state of emergency. And again, his contribution and the case being made clearly demonstrates a confusion in his mind about what this is all about. Right? The state of emergency is a constitutional measure, a measure. Right? Now, when he talks a constitutional act, it's a declaration of a state of emergency, which then empowers him under the Emergency Powers Act. Not empowers him, But then kicks in the Emergency Powers Act, which creates the regulations, the appointment of the company authority, and it allows for two regulations, the appointment of a company authority. Now, the measures that's being made, the relation between the measures being made, right, has to be in relation to the matter that informs the state of emergency. And in this case, the pandemic. We accept that this pandemic is probably the worst in our lifetime. But this is not the first pandemic that's been known to the world. Right? So what I'm saying, it may not even be the worst that we have, because I could go back in history and talk with some of those, right? But I'm saying in our recent memory, it is the worst, right? But so we don't have to always reinvent the wheels, right? Back in the early 1900s, we passed an act called the Quarantine Act. What was that? That was to deal with infectious diseases and its transmission in the country. We also have the Health Services Act, which allows for, and the Constitution allows for, certain enactments to be made to deal with pandemics and infectious disease and its passing. It doesn't necessarily follow that you need a declaration of a state of emergency where you suspend civil liberties. That could be done by ordinary legislation. Their own Attorney General would agree with that. So we're not talking about the measures to be made. We're talking about the suspension of civil liberties that relates to the state of emergency that's been declared. And if you listen to the victory lap, which I call, that's being run by the government, the question is there a state of emergency? If they're handling this matter, this pandemic so well, why do you need a state of emergency? You heard the praises that they're saying, how well they're doing. Why is it necessary? Right? What is necessary, we agree, is to adapt the tools that are necessary for the purposes of the situation at hand. You don't need to suspend civil liberties for that. You could go to the Health Services Act and do regulations under that. Or, if necessary, you've had 10 months. That's what the country, 10 months, we could have passed laws, local domination laws to address the situation. You know, it is so ironic. It is so ironic that the member for Kalani, the Prime Minister, will call in aid the similarities between him and my colleague, Peter Nodded. Right? And the similarities, how they were doctors together, how they followed the same path, both professionally and politically. Right? But Mr. Speaker, the BGI know. And he also said that the BJ he knows would have used every tool necessary. Well, you know, the BGI know. He would have been quite discerning in the selection of the tools that is necessary to fight this. The BGI know. And the BGI know would have consider first the impact on the poor and the least amongst us, how it's going to impact them before he make any step. He'll be concerned about equality and equity in dealing with this pandemic and the measures he will be putting in place. That's the BGI know. And the BGI know was in fact compassionate. And he was concerned about the ordinary small man in our country. He would not take a ball when a hammer could have done the job. That's the BGI know. Right? And so, Mr. Speaker, I think the confusion between and the lighting of the state of emergency that to which the Article 29 speaks to, and the measures that are being made under the emergency, they're two separate issues. You don't need that resay, and you continue to say that is not needed. Right? And you know, remember, spoke about Cat Island. He's the prime minister. There was a sad commentary of a family in his constituency. The member Kalani, a family of five young children living in a one-room wooden house, dilapidated in the woods. No running water, no electricity. Crying, no one could help them. No food. That's his constituency now. In Nassau. I need to talk over here. I hope when he talks, man, you go to Canada, right? And someone said Kalani should be talking about that, right? And so that's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, right? And so, Mr. Speaker. Now, I also, Speaker,
Honorable members. Honorable members.
I also, and I can describe that more, but I'll leave it like that. But look after the people in your constituency. Look, it is the least amongst us. It is the poor amongst us that requires first consideration. And that's why when I spoke about the opening of the bars, I was thinking about the least amongst us, the poor amongst us. Because many of them, the opening of the bars, it was to highlight, Mr. Speaker. It was to highlight.
Honorable members.
It was to highlight, Mr. Speaker, the special interest guidance, what is the Northern Southern government. They would allow the mahogany bar to open non-stop. Right, that was the question. It wasn't a question of opening the bars. It's a question of leveling the playing field, so that those who most need the assistance could get it. Why would you allow mahogany bar to open, to sell liquor, right, outside of the Life Key Gate, and stop, say, Bren Bar on Cordo Avenue from being able to do the same thing? He has about 6 persons working in his establishment. It's not open the bars. That's not the point. The point is leveling the playing field. And it is not true to say. It is not true to say that they are part of the hotel. Island House is gated away from the mahogany bar. It's not a part of the hotel at all. And he continues to perpetuate this untruth. It is because we have exposed them for what they are. They are catered to the special interests in this country. And then he goes on to say that it is his view that if we were in power, handling this pandemic now, that we'll have chaos and confusion. Well, that's his view. And I say that's his view, but I'm going to say the view is unfounded. That's unfounded because there's no evidence to say that. That's his view. But I have evidence to show that your handling of the pandemic, you in charge, produced chaos. It produced confusion. It brought much pain and unconscionable punishment on Bahamians. Just ask the boy who was selling the coconut water. Ask the young man who went to get water for his grandfather to clean up. Ask them. That's the pain and suffering, right? You look, the chaos and confusion that was caused by the handling with all the lockdowns and the food stores. That's where the chaos is. We know, the evidence was there. The evidence was there. The evidence was, just look at the confusion. The same, he's opining that will be chaos and confusion if it were me. What I'm saying to you, it was. And it was demonstrated. The people had it. The people saw it. They felt it. They were confused. They were in chaos. Go around the grocery stores. We saw it. We saw it. So I'm saying that's the evidence. That's where the confusion and chaos lie, in your handling of it. You could predict it would be so, but I say no. It is there. That's the evidence. Then he spoke about the COVID-19 task force. No, that we form a task force. The truth of the matter is this, Mr. Speaker. After much badgering, I took a team and met with the task force of the government, the task force that I thought was the government task force, headed by the then Minister of Health. We met in his office. We had a wonderful exchange for about 2 or 3 hours or more. And we asked to be included. We asked to allow 1 or 2 of our members to be a part of that task force. He said it will be taken under advisement. He said, we'll get back to you. In the meantime, I had a private conversation with the minister. I didn't speak to that yet about things was happening. After that meeting, the next thing I heard, there's a task force at the Ministry of Health. There was a task force down in the Prime Minister's office. I ain't gonna talk about NEMA trying to start his own task force over the same matter. So it's a confusion. So we waited. In the meantime, we thought it was our duty to understand as much as we could about this pandemic. We thought it was our duty to see what we could come up with and provide advice and positions to the government. And that's what we did. There was no criticism. Look at everything we had to say. It was only questioning and asking and pointing and looking at where it is. We weren't looking at the countries that were failing. We're looking at the countries that were performing well and trying to get the best practices out of it and calling our views and providing it to the government. Right? We send it to them. Right? And so when you do, I did ask you to look at Barbados. And Barbados has a slippage. So what you need to do is still look at Barbados and see why they slip, so that you won't make the same mistake going forward. That's all. That's all. That's all I say, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thought I ought to just address those few matters that the member for Kalani attempted to make some issues out of, right? Now, Mr. Speaker, let me say, we do not support the government's resolution to yet again extend, and that's what I'm saying, the state of emergency. It is the state of emergency that deals with the suspension of civil liberties in these countries. We have some issues with a lot of the measures that they have implemented. For example, lockdowns and curfews and the assessment of that. And I noticed that they quote the CDC and all that, and they're much literature as the efficacy of lockdowns and curfews and how they really don't assist in curtailing the transmission. Right? So for example, what they said. So there's a lot of that, right? So Mr. Speaker, so what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, because when you talk about curfew, it brings everybody together. That's why it transmitted so much in family. Right? So, anyhow, Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that we supported the initial state of emergency. The emergency measures were intended to be short-term, a means of giving the government the flexibility to manage a new and urgent public health crisis. Mr. Speaker, some 10 months have passed since the Prime Minister appointed himself as the sole competent authority. And for 10 months, he has ruled without consultation, without transparency, and without accountability. 10 months later, the threat of COVID has not disappeared. nor are we COVID-free, as the more than 1,100 Bahamians with active cases of COVID tell us. But any new measures needed to keep Bahamians safe can be enacted, as I indicated before, through ordinary legislation. This government's own Attorney General, I reiterate, has confirmed this. Instead, the Prime Minister has decided once again extend for himself the power to spend public funds. This is what he's doing here with the extension of the state of emergency. Right? He's entrenching the power to spend public funds outside of the ordinary procurement process. He has extended power to himself to punish and reward. The power to pick favorites, right? Like mahogany. And the power to make decisions without having to debate or defend them. Mr. Speaker, the obvious question is, why is this Prime Minister so determined to operate without parliamentary oversight? The answer has nothing to do with public health and everything to do, in my view, with avoiding accountability. Anyone who comment? Loretta is speaking. Mr. Speaker, the emergency regulations might give the competent authority great power. But with great power, Mr. Prime Minister, there are also some responsibilities. Within 6 weeks of the expiration, Mr. Speaker, within 6 weeks of the expiration of a proclamation of emergency, the Prime Minister is required, and the Minister of Finance is required to bring a report before Parliament detailing expenditures, suppliers for the goods and services procured, and the reasons those suppliers were chosen. Just look at Section 11, subsection 2 of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Regulations that we lay here, that you're extending now to. Twice the proclamation of emergency has expired, at the end of June and in November. And neither time did you comply with that requirement. Neither time. You are in breach of the law yourself, sir. You're picking up the coconut, the fellow selling coconut water, picking up the fellow going to get water from the pump to look after his grandfather. They're digging hard before the court. What you can do it yourself now. But you don't report yet. The law requires that you sign the regulation. I think that's what you're going to do. Let us know how you're spending our money, who you're spending it with. Right? And I want to know, why haven't you done it? What do you want the Bahamian people to know? What do you not want the Bahamian people to know about how you are operating behind closed doors? Which expenditures and which suppliers are so controversial that you cannot disclose them to the public as the law so required? The law says you should be reporting within 6 weeks before the end of the proclamation. You have not done it. And twice the proclamation of emergency has expired. Why are you not doing it? What are you hiding? And what is so controversial about these expenditures? What are so controversial about the suppliers who are supplying you? What is it?
I think you got something there.
What is it? Huh?
Something else.
You know, but we shouldn't. I don't know. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. Because every promise made, but it's not a promise. You're breaking the law here. But I add that to every promise made to the Bahamian people without accountability, those promises are sitting somewhere in someone's dustbin. Even if we aren't surprised, we should still be shocked. Because it should be shocking to us to see a prime minister treat the law, and I add the people, with such disdain. The same prime minister who's so quick to impose heavy fines on Bahamians for the most minor infraction is himself in violation of his own regulation. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to let the lack of transparency distract us from the incompetence. This government comes to this honorable house looking for praise from the Bahamian people when they should be asking for forgiveness. It is their failure to plan ahead, despite all the warnings they were given, that resulted in months of lockdowns and curfews. Mr. Speaker, those lockdowns took a wrecking ball to our local economy. How many Bahamian businesses closed their doors in the last few months? How many people lost their homes as a result? How many Bahamian children are hungry right now, right this minute? Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Dorian and COVID-19 have been terrible blows. It is tragic that in both cases, terrible situations were made worse by mistakes and mismanagement. There was always going to be suffering. We accept that. But what we say, it didn't have to be this bad. It was the botched reopening plan in June that led to thousands of new COVID cases. There was no plan. And without enough testing and tracing in place to halt the outbreak, the competent authority had to turn to lockdowns and curfews. Visitors were warned to stay away. As Sandals resorts reopened across the Caribbean, the Sandals resorts here stayed closed and their employees stayed home. I ain't gonna talk about Club Bed in San Salvador. Prime Minister, the owner's still waiting to talk to you, man. They want to talk to you. You see, if you want to talk to them, they may have found a way to open, putting in the protocol. They're still waiting. Guess what? If you don't speak to them, they won't speak to me. They said to me, let us talk to the government first. Right? And I say they want to talk to you first before they talk to me. Because they don't want any problem. You gotta treat these people, man. I had 400 people working, Bahamians working. They now lost their job. They had to be done in full, they've been made redundant. And maybe for the end, you got to talk with these people. You need to go and talk to. I heard you bragging about the point and Margaritaville opening. Go and see them, see what they're doing, see the Bahamians that they're hiring. They want to see you and talk to you. They don't want to talk to me. You're the Prime Minister. They don't want to talk. Why? Why you wouldn't go talk with them? What you afraid of? Get some courage, man. Be brave and go and talk to these people. You know? So, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes.
No one.
Honorable member for Carolina. The chair recognizes the member for Kalani on the point of order.
I got to time.
Speaker, the member is politicizing an issue. At no time, the member is trying to send a message to the constituents in San Salvador that the hotel there is closed because the Prime Minister not responding to certain individuals. At no time, shut up. At no time, I retract. At no time was my office or I written about any meeting with Club Med. Now the member must recognize that France has gone viral. They are locked down, and most of the guests come from France. They cannot fly out. They cannot leave. And if the member have the solution, he's saying lockdowns don't work. I and the rest of the world are waiting to hear what to do, because obviously all of us are wrong. Only he has the solution.
You know, I'm speechless. The Prime Minister is saying that at no time he heard from the Club Med people. You say he had no complaint. See, you got the man in the back. You say you won't say it, but you telling me you might stop. Stay out of big people business. Stay out of big people business. So, Mr. Speaker, what is surprising? What is surprising is the Prime. We have a hotel in this country that has over 400 employees. The pandemic gets brought about some causing them to shut down. And the prime minister just sits there and wait for the owners or the managers to come to speak to him. Man, you have to show some concern. And I'm hearing the same thing about all the properties here in New Providence too. You have to show concern for your Bahamian employees, man. Go and talk. You should be running behind them and say, look, man, I need to know what you're doing. I need to have you open. You have to take the action, man. You have to take action. You can't react. You're supposed to go and see them, man. That's a monumental failure. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. I'm flabbergasted, Mr. Prime Minister. You're going to wait. The hotel is closing down. It's impacting hundreds and thousands of Bahamians. And you're going to wait till they come to you? You go to them, man, and try to stop the closing. Try to work out some deals. Try to find out how you can get them to stay open. That's what you're supposed to do, man. I'm surprised. So I see why they tell me they want to talk. And they want to talk to you first. You're not political about that. That's Bahamians. The workers on Paradise Island. The workers at Bahama. You know, you have a new hotel about to open and you don't go speak. I know they tried to reach you. They sent many messages to you. I sent you a message. I sent you a message about it. Right? And so, Mr. Speaker, you know, no one will forget, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister announced without warning an immediate week-long lockdown. Right? And obviously that was insanity. And he was forced to reverse that course. And if you look at, you know, if you were talking about looking at Barbados, he spoke about Barbados. Barbados, Mia is about to lock down, right? But what he done? How many notice he gave? 2 weeks. We shut down right immediately. That's something you could take note of. Take note of giving notice to people instead of being right. And that's what we've been seeing, you know. And you know, they continue the number of policy reversals. We've seen a lot of these. 1 week the government boasts about a massive new rapid testing policy for borders. The next week it's scrapped. Rapid testing on 5 days, 1 day. Rapid testing on day 5 of visitors is crucial to keep the country safe, they told us. But then shrugged their shoulders when large percentages failed to show up. There are new regulations announced at Christmas, then hastily withdrawn. These are some of the reversals. I can talk about all of them. And that adds to the confusion, chaos. There is evidence of chaos and confusion that rests with you. You only think it's gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen underneath. Trust me. This, Mr. Speaker, the zigzagging, the reversal, the uncertainty, this is the cost of having a competent authority who feels no need to consult widely and no need to present before the Parliament and the people's representatives any data or science or rationales for its decision. I wish, Mr. Speaker, I wish the COVID crisis were over. I'm ready for it to end. We all are. But in fact, new, more transmissible strains of COVID are now circulating in dozens of countries. One of these strains is the South African strain. It's called the 501Y strain, which is considered to be more deadly and more infectious. So untransmissible, right? And so we need, right? And we need to be prepared for this, right? We have sent out something. What this will mean, Mr. Speaker, for the Bahamas? What will it mean? And where's the government's plan to stop this, right? So, Mr. Speaker, they have, Mr. Speaker, at their disposal, thousands of employees, millions of dollars, but I see no plan in fact. We urge you to act now instead of waiting for a crisis to develop and only then reacting. At a minimum, the government needs to expand testing capabilities to be in a position to tamp down any new outbreaks. Testing must be made accessible and free. For Bahamians concerned, they may have been exposed to the virus. The government must prepare now to isolate any new cases so that Bahamians across the country can be treated in our clinics and hospitals for other illnesses without concerns about being infected there. Cloth masks may not offer sufficient protection from the new coronavirus variants. In addition to ensuring sufficient PPE for healthcare workers, the government, I recommend, should stockpile medical grade mask offering what, 94 to 95% filtration, and provide them to all frontline workers, from immigration to police to defense force workers, as well as others. The government has said that they have the formula to beat COVID, but their formula of lockdowns and curfews decimated our local economy. And I always say lockdowns are not a plan. Lockdowns should be a last resort, not a first step. You only need to lock everyone up if you don't have enough testing and tracing to find and contain the virus. So move now, I recommend. Put those resources in place to avoid future lockdowns. Mr. Speaker, if I could have one more minute, please. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of pain in the Bahamas right now. The food lines are long, more hotel workers are being furloughed, and the news grim. The government's announcement that it will stop food distribution and employment benefits, I think he indicated he's extending it until the end of February. But, according to the state of emergency goes to May 23rd. Right? No, we expect you to reassess it. See, listen, I tell some fellas you're not a good poker player. So I know you're gonna reassess. Yeah, I know you're gonna reassess it. Yeah, I say, no, that's why I could predict. Because I see your hand. I know whether to raise the bet or call. The government's he's been gambling all along. He's been gambling all along. So because the
Honorable member,
announcement,
you can wrap up now.
The announcement to end the unemployment benefits and the food distribution is going to cause a lot of anxiety. Many people are angry about the frequent and indiscriminate roadblocks and believe the issuance of citation is a scheme to raise money from financially stressed Bahamians rather than a strategy to keep us safe. Rather than a strategy to keep us safe. And I'm saying, no, I'm just listen to what people say, right? Mr. Speaker, I'm saying we can't afford more pain. We can't afford, these premature victory laps by politicians. We need them to use the resources of the government, not to campaign, but to plan. This extension to the state of emergency is not about public health in our view, and we will not support this resolution.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamakro.
Thank you very much.
And the real member for Cat Island.
David, you said first. Let me extend gratitude to the Master for allowing me to be here one more time and to again express a blessed Happy New Year to Bahamians everywhere and everybody who finds themselves within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I sat riveted to my chair as I listened to the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and Salvador. Yeah. And the only thing that came to my mind is a former program that I had very little interest in, called The Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. Caviar wishes, champagne wishes, and caviar dreams. We are in the middle of the world, and the scientists have said that. And I want to just quote from the new president of America, where he says, we must be led by science. And all I heard, I can't use that the other word, was a gentleman talking about gambling. This is no time to put a gambler in charge of this country. Mr. Speaker, this whole pandemic has a history, and I will go into the history. They say if you want to know me, come see where I live. And when you look at the poor representation, I'll give a proper representation that Cat Island has given over the years. And shamelessly gets up in the House, Mr. Speaker, and says that we have water in Cat Island. Yes, we have water in Cat Island. We have water in the Sefton, and we have water in very deep wells. And old people, seniors should not go around them as the head sling. It take a long time to pull them out. And he comes and he brags of the fact, or tries to mama guide this parliament, when one of the most youngest members in this house saw the need for one of the main structural development of our great Cat Island. To install.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and Salvador on a point of order.
Speaker, the member is, it bothers me not, because I know what I would have done. The Speaker, the program that the youngest member is implementing was a program that was negotiated by me with the Caribbean Development Bank, and it was a part of a larger program to bring potable water in all parts of the country. So it's something that was ongoing, and in fact, the Cat Islanders know how far along we were in the program. So if any mama guying is going on, it's there. That's where the mama guying is going on.
What about the mall?
Airport. Name something in their honor. Nothing. I called one of my friends. I said, go and check the plaque of the school where we went to on Old Bike. Absolutely nothing. What about proper clinic? He's going to say now he was going to build 3 for a population of over 3,000 people. What about breaking down the morgue and people have to put people on ice? What about a proper airport? People are now sitting on the outside rain, wet them, sun dry them.
You know Cat Island?
Please don't just. What about those things? What about the young people? What about inviting? The Cat Island could have been and should be an economic free trade power zone.
But they have no ministry, so he can do that.
Running, if not just as good or better than where we will have Abaco or Exuma. He was the deputy prime minister, the minister of works. Bridges are going into Andros. And then you get up and you say, and then, I've heard persons, and my teacher, Cosette Johnson, a brilliant lady. I had my challenges. I saw when their pros went on the line and said, Ellsworth, you must learn how to spell. You must learn how to do these things. That's why my daddy sat me down, He says, Ellsworth, let me tell you, some of the greatest men that's ever served. Moses had his challenge. And he told me about some other people. He said, but from you were a baby, you were born to succeed.
Yes, sir.
Keep going.
I know that's beneath you,
Keep
that
going.
right there. That's beneath you.
And
you know better than that. Yeah, you know better than that. To say what you just said. That's beneath you.
Story.
That's beneath
He thinks he knows the story.
Not do that.
So, Mr. Speaker, these are the things that we're looking
No, you want to get up and do it. That's beneath you, man.
Development of
To say something like that.
In
I
the
expect better
development
of
of
you.
the country. No, man, I listen, I've heard those things over and over. And, my father told me some things about his history. He said, but you know what I realized else? I didn't have the problem. They had the problem. You were made in the image. Yeah. As Felix Bethel told me about the black bouncing baby bastard boy. There goes Ellsworth Johnson and the Felix Bethel. And almost all of us share that history. Because we were brought here and certain things happened. But he says, you must shine. He says, I must never hear you give up. Even if you have to find a horse of hope. Ride! And you tell all black boys, all black girls, that they should never give up. Never. And that's why I stand here with pride. Because I know who's in charge. Not Cat Island.
Not Cat Island.
Right, Cat Island. Right, Cat Island. And every morning I get up, conquer and subdue his mind. That's what it is. So when I hear the nonsense that Cat Island would spew, I remember what Daddy told me.
Remember what Daddy told me, son. You sound like a roaring lion.
Rush it off.
That's what I do.
Rush it off.
And so I am here to represent the good people of Yamacraw, and I will not be silenced by him. And that's why we went around in the park in Yamacraw and we paint the flag of the Bahamas there. It's about sovereignty and loving this country, and every child that comes there, they know that. So when you ride in, that's what you see. That's why we started a literacy program, because we want everybody to read, because we know the statistics. And we will not fool people to think that it's different. That is why we went out. Some people try to give me, devices, but they wanted something else. They said, keep your devices. God will bless us with more. And we got them. We put those in their hands to help them, because the baton will soon be moved from our hands, and we have to build another generation. And that's all we're saying to Cat Island. We have the baton. There was a time when education, religion, healthcare, and all those things wasn't ours. Right here in this country. So we must, while we have it, we must do better. I'm not going to say everything is good in Yamacraw. I'll be a fool. I'll be telling a lie. Everything ain't perfect. But we're going to work and we're going to push. The same thing with COVID-19. I sat and I listened to him, and that's why I said champagne wishes and caviar dreams. He talked about meeting with the Prime Minister. When the Prime Minister came and said, listen, I thought about it this morning as I spoke with my colleagues around the Caribbean. And so he said to him, let's meet, man. That's before the pandemic. Let's meet, let's have a discussion. He stood beside me and said, no, come tell me this morning to come meeting with you. He didn't come. Then I watched him. My mouth didn't drop, because there are certain things I've come to expect. When he was on a certain program and said, why wouldn't you meet? Said, they don't take me serious. Exuma came, and guess what? The former Attorney General said it right when she said that the strategic leader in this is Dr. Dal Regis. That's why I start off with President Biden said, let's be led by science. Kalani said, PAHO and the World Health Organization will lead us. My neighbor right there, and we can work together hard, Elizabeth. We got to come back. Elizabeth can confirm, these are the people that will lead us through this international pandemic. And that these are the things that they were saying that we should do. Sometimes there were discussions. We can't go that far, man. They said, yes, you have to go that far. You have to lock down. And that's why he invited him to come and meet with them. Never came. But he's here in The Guardian saying the spirits industry should be allowed to operate in the manner of food stores. And then talking about how he could gamble. You see, no time for gambling. Kalani, the Kalani-led administration went to the church, went to the teachers, and went to almost every sector of this community and say, this is what we have to do. And if you want to, come and meet with the scientists, with the experts. He admits that he's not used to when Dr. Regis leads a press conference. He said, okay, this is when Dr. Sampson, and I want to commend him for the work that he did when he was there. Now that you have the new Minister of Health, Dr. says, okay, this one is for the expert in this area.
Yeah.
When a political question comes, how you can provide these things, you come. That's how she did it. That's how she does it.
Yeah.
Open, close, do this, do that. would not come to the table. And I understand, you know, somebody came to my house this morning and says, now listen, he's my very good friend. He says, you go easy on my leader today. I said, not possible. Not possible. I am now 50 years old. Hasn't God been good to me?
Very good to you. Very good to you. God has been good. God has been good to you.
I said, you know, since I came here, I ain't gonna put on no weight. So I had to change my clothes because I can't afford it. But he's been very good to me. So I ain't come here to play and jest. Sometimes I see things across the floor, but what I say across the floor is truth. It's truth. And he says, they're the big people business. That's why they develop small acts.
Cut down big trees.
To cut down big trees. Mr. Speaker, this is very serious. And I heard persons making mention of the Health Services Act, the Quarantine Act, and the Constitution. Now, the framers of our Constitution envisioned a time such as this.
Yes.
I pull up on my computer, I crave indulgence. The statistics around the world that of the millions of people that are now dying. I get up early in the morning and I do my little reconnaissance of the different stations. I see what's happening in Europe. My daughter's now in Europe. They don't play with this stuff. They have freezer loads of bodies. Let's not go away. We know of the time in this country. I called Dr. Elizabeth about my sister. And he gave me some assistance. He said, also, boy, we put. Then I called him about my niece. When someone told me with Dr. Sanson, I have to be careful with him because if you're hard free coach, you need him.
You got hot liver kid gloves.
I called him when Dr. Sanson said, listen, man, this thing is so bad. Your niece is outside in the triage in a tent. We had people in hotels. He says, and you know what Dr. San said? And I want him to correct me once, and elsewhere she would be admitted, and she had serious diabetes. Since she's diagnosed with COVID-19, we could take her in the hospital. And she was diagnosed. He took her and he called me, he let me how she was going. My sister was the first to die. It's serious. And when we talk about leveling the playing fields, not every Bahamian could jet set. That's why I said caviar wishes and champagne drinks.
What you mean by jet set?
Huh?
What you mean by jet
No,
set?
not everybody could fly, right, man? I was hurt, you know. When I heard my cousin wasn't well, he could have confessed. I called him, boy, I said, this can't happen. Everybody was frightened. And that's why I be careful I treat him, you know. Because there are people who are watching saying, now listen, you got out of hand. And I know this evening they ain't gonna tell me I got out of hand with him. But this is serious business. This is about the lives of people. This is about police officers work, and I hear them say about Kalani didn't arrest anybody. There's a procedure. The officers go out and indirectly insult them. They exercise their discretion. It's not right. The commissioner would tell you if I get it wrong, take us to court, or tell us how we do it. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Rain Monroe says he called the commissioner and has conversations with him. Once they're taken into custody, they're taken to a court. Then the court makes a decision. And that has absolutely nothing to do with Kalani. To suggest that would mean that those august bodies are compromised. They shouldn't do that. Sometimes we go to court and we argue cases. We think it's dead right. The judge says dead wrong. All of us have had that experience. And I watch these underhanded ways the things are done. I watch him on the show. In the midst of the world, I mean, you have a new variant now. I look at the variant. My friend, I spoke to her in Jamaica, and she says, we have it in Jamaica. This is serious. I saw Bishop Hall the other day. Please get a copy of his book. I have a copy. It can help you. Just read those sermons. Went in and went through that. A gentleman from Abaco shut down the church. I forgot his name. Remember? Bishop Mills. So you all stay home now. I've been by myself for 2 weeks. And what I experienced, nobody should. If you have the right way of doing things, Dr. Del Regis, those are there waiting to hear from you. You ain't got to talk to us. Call Dr. Del Regis and tell her, I hope you're not packing up to leave. Call that Dr. Del Regis and tell her, those police officers are working hard. I've had people in my constituency who've gotten sick. Nurses have died. A doctor has died. We talk about going now around campaigning. You can't, I tell people, I say, Dr. Kalani says you don't want too much people walking around. Walking around. I can't come in your house. I can't do these things. You come right, everything you do, jumping around like a royal jester. Come and tell us, anybody, anywhere in this house, anywhere around the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, if you have a better way of doing it, come forward and tell us. And if you don't want to come to Kalani, Yamakro, or anybody in here, if you don't want to go to Pine Ridge, go to Dr. Del Regis. Cat Island gone. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has recorded 8,140 cases. 6,746 was recovered. 175 died. These are recent statistics. 25.5 million in the US and growing. 425,000 deaths. India, 10.7 million. 10.4 million recovered, 554,000 deaths. This is real. Brazil, 8.93 million. 7.9 million recovered, 219,000 died. And that's women, men, husband, sister, grandfather, you name it. Russia, 3.72 million. And I give these figures because this is what the framers of the Constitution thought about. When you're thinking about quarantine or the Health Services Act, something or breakout somewhere, you deal with it in the Bahamas. This is about people coming and going. I could tell you, he's talking about the Prime Minister meeting with people from the point. The relevant people meet with the people who needs to meet with them. Point, make application. Some of the leaders, we deal with it. Tourism, go and meet. That's why I hear them talking about, he's an autocratic leader. You look at any one of these ministries, environmental health is not here. The dump is gone. Carmichael is not here. Totally revision of BPS. Tourism. In the middle of a pandemic, the sea is rolling and breaking, the winds and the waves. 1 million notes, brother, 1 million notes on. Shall obey your will. But you got to hold on and go through. Social services, never seen this before. Having to feed all these people. And even the best that we do, people still don't have. I can tell you. And that's why I tell MPs, still go in the community. People want to see you. And the spectacular thing about Bahamians is they understand what's happening. That these are difficult times. Sometimes some of them, I go to some of them, they know that I don't have. You get paid.
Honorable member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
We are approaching the 1 o'clock hour. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do move that the business of this House to continue beyond 1 p.m. today, just to allow the member to finish. He has another 10 minutes, and then we will be moving to the luncheon break and returning at 3 p.m.
Thank you. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded for the business of this House to extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. It is ordered that the business of this House to extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are some of the realities as outlined by the Minister of Health and Prime Minister and the member for Kalani. Asia, South Africa, the UK, the US, Barbados, Jamaica, Nassau. You call the countries. Canada, you can't come to Canada now. And when we look at the measures that were put in place in the Bahamas, and now we look around the world, we look like a choir boy or girl. The measures are much more draconian. Nobody ever thought that you go to the US, you would see, ain't no bargaining. You quarantining for 14 days. 10 days, thank you very much. And you're testing. Canada sometimes says, only if you could come and you stay in the airport and you go straight through. And these are advanced countries with the scientists. Not to say anything, but we have some of the best in the Bahamas. Advanced countries. We are punching above our belt. And in the context of COVID-19, I want to commend and congratulate members of the police force. I want to commend and congratulate members in the customs department. I want to commend and congratulate those nurses, doctors, and assistants in the hospital, because they get up and go. They get up and go, sometimes to almost certain death. And even when we start to carry on and say, I ain't gonna stay home, they gotta go. My friends just tell me, they come in the night and sit at my house and tell me they gotta go. And I'm gonna get to them. They gotta go out there and meet those persons and treat them with respect. And then gotta go back to their wives and their children and assure them that even though I was in the crowd today, I'm not infected. I could come back in the house. Okay, can you imagine? These are heroes. They don't need nobody to be trifling with them. The reality is, listen, we are in a serious circumstance financially. All of the economists will say, as they're doing around the world, send people home. But we know if we send them home, that may be the only person that's working, right? In the house. Who's having to support the house? So there's some people who go to work who really don't do much. But this is the burden that the whole Bahamas is carrying. They know that. And they're playing these games. They get more masks, get more this, get more that. Then they can tell you, don't borrow to get it. So I want to commend the persons in the immigration department, everybody that's working. And for those people who, all of the Bahamas, whether or not they go down the road expressing their will or not, when you speak with them generally, they say they understand. I had to tell a Lord brother, I said, what was our Lord, senior Lord brother thinking of? On the road, jumping up. With comorbidities. Hollering and screaming the other day. Can't be serious. And when I see him, I can tell him that didn't make sense. Then you get sick, your loved ones have to cry, the whole country have to cry. Mr. Speaker, this is reality. You know, I brought this article and I'm going to lay it on the floor of the House. Opposition leader Brave Davis has reiterated the Progressive Liberal Party's general support for measures of the government, because the government is taking some efforts to contain COVID-19 in the Bahamas. So, hello? The calls on the Minister of Administration to allow liquor stores to open.
Honorable member, state the source and the date.
This is open liquor stores and open borders to Bahamians. 30th of March 2020. This is a document from the Guardian. At the beginning of the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, he says the spirit, and he emphasizes, I emphasize, I take it one by one, the spirits industry should be allowed to operate. And when he refers to the spirit industry, he says he wants to create a level playing field. A level playing field. But for these, did you say 4 people? No, you didn't. 4 people. Dr. David Allen did, when I was at UB, then College Government did a very good study on alcohol consumption. And I would recommend that to the members of Kerala. But there are other things. You see, we don't have that equality. And shortly after he did this, he refused to come to the meeting that his deputy came to meet with. And they didn't say very much. Because after Kalani opened the meeting, he said, are there any questions or concerns that you have? Dr. Dalrigi, correct me if I'm wrong. You can put those questions and concerns that you want. And I think there was then another opportunity for them to go alone and put these suggestions. I've never heard any criticism, and it should never go, against the professional grouping of Bahamians that we have established, working with the World Health Organization and PAHO, Mr. Speaker, to assist in dealing with this pandemic. But Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say this, because I've heard this before. When we look at the enormity of what's happening, the framers of our Constitution, in their eminent wisdom, when you look at the wording of the Health Services Act or the Quarantine Act, and then you look at what the Constitution provides for, dealing specifically with civil liberties and fundamental rights, they understood that this time will come when you might have to say, just like they're doing with states in America, we have to control where we go. Just as how they're doing about the continent of Europe, we have to control how you move back and forth. Even though you have a European Union, you have to regulate the movement. We have to do the very same thing with Cat Island, Rumkey, San Salvador, Exuma. When you heard the decision was made to say to person, don't travel to this island, that didn't really come from Kalani. That was a medical expert. Follow the science. Follow the science. That's what Mr. Biden is saying. And the world is following the science. You can't follow the lawyer. You can't follow the carpenter and these things. You can't follow the plumber. You got to follow the healthcare professionals. The healthcare professionals were so serious. They said, listen, it is our duty to save life. You got to figure out a way how you can keep the economy going. But we're going to wash our hands. We don't want to have to watch, say, I told you so, or wash our hands. That's how serious it is. And so, Mr. Speaker, I endorse, and I'm quite certain the whole Bahamas, when I have an opportunity, I speak to people. And I could give names, not fictitious people. Senior, Mr. I can call his name, the gentleman for super values, you don't mind. Mr. Rupert Roberts. You know, and I prayed he forgives me. He says, he called me and they say, Mr. Johnson. These people ain't look like they serious. All them bumping up on each other. For us who have, my mother, I haven't gone to Cat Island as yet. I would hate to know that I took it there. I had a meeting last night with my team in Yamakura. I said, we can leave it all on the track. We on the home stretch. I said, but we ain't going in people's house. At the end of the day, it will not be said that we transmitted this to anybody. Never. Mask, whatever we need. That's what you do. No big crowd. Man. You have to follow the protocol. And that is what we have to do. All of us, even though we remonstrate or we go against each other, are in this together. And we must have agreement on this. And it's healthy, you know. I'm not saying that to say that we will always agree on how to do it. That we will always agree on how to do it. And that's the beauty of a constitutional democracy. All of us have our view on how we want to preserve the sovereignty of the Bahamas or the youth or our loved ones, or how to run this country. But at a certain level, there must be, as South Andrews just made, South Andrews just said a word, and I'm going to borrow that from him. At a certain level, there must be solidarity. Solidarity. When I go to church on Sunday, I sit where they tell me to sit. We have it properly spaced. When I go to church, you sit where you said, my daughter, now she has to go to school with her mask and a thing and all those different things. We have to try our best. If we got extra tablets to give it, sometimes we give the persons outside of the community. Give it to them to try and help us through this. Mr. Speaker, this is not only local to the Bahamas. This is a worldwide, frightening pandemic. And thank God, we believe in a God who we know is in charge and who will preserve us. And even when we lose some, we still could say, God give, God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That is the time in which we're living. We don't know where it's going to be for us. All of us were sad. And I don't care what we say with Rumkey and Cat Island, Rumkey and San Salvador, when we found out he was COVID positive. When we heard that the minister for works, I don't see my good colleague for South Ilutra. When we heard that they were COVID-19 positive. And then for those who have to go in, Dr. San have to go in all the time. Dr. San, I can't say that. Dr. Hassan has young children who are dependent on him to see him come home. To be there, and it's more than just the money. For them to, because there's some snakes around here who will hurt children. So I tell all my girls, you tell daddy. Daddy will deal with it. And so I'm getting ready to campaign. I'm going to close right now. I'm going with the same mantra. If you don't take care of your children, after I had a conversation with you, you don't need to be with me. I don't mind losing that vote. Violence against women in the country is too high. Incest and violence against women and girls, it shouldn't even be high. It shouldn't be there. Mothers and fathers pay your children bills. Pay it. If I got friends and they don't take care of the children, we got to talk. Infidel. Less than an infidel. Thank you very much, my brother. And so, I heard what my good friend Cat Island said under his voice. I was taught by the master. My grandmother always said, if they can't say nothing worse to you that they did not say about the master, forget it. I forgive you, my big brother. And may God continue to bless Yamakro, each and every one of us. And may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Yamakro support.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes as many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town. Thank you, Member for Fox Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I do not move that the House suspend until 3 p.m.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House to suspend for lunch until 3 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose would stand. The business of this House will suspend now until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.